Right, let's kick things off. I am here tonight to deliver you a webinar on how to set good financial goals and actually achieve said goals. We've got lots to cover off. So I'll just start off by introducing myself. My name is Katie Wesney. I've run our Takapuna office of Enable Me for many years. I'm now the head strategic coach for New Zealand. So I have amazing clients like yourself, and I also help coach the coaches. My background is I'm a chartered accountant as well as a financial advisor. So I'm a total nerd around money and numbers. And of course, tonight, it doesn't constitute individual financial advice. We've designed it around the general principles we work towards in terms of helping our clients forge their path towards financial success. So we'll cover off lots of tips and tricks at a general level. But if you are looking for specific advice, I encourage you to see a financial advisor. So in terms of a rundown for tonight, we're going to be going through, well, why should we even set financial goals now, Katie? What is the driver behind it? How to set good, clear goals that you will actually follow? What's the secret sauce around actually achieving those goals? Because it's one thing to set a good goal, it's another thing to make sure that you achieve said goal. And there definitely is a recipe around that. And just the importance of making sure that you celebrate the wins along the way. We'll summarize key takeaways and action points. And we will end with a Q&A. Thank you to the people who have already provided questions. If you think of anything that you'd like to ask as I go through this webinar tonight, please just pop them in the chat box below. My awesome producer will collate those and we can hopefully go through them at the end. So just kind of setting the scene in terms of the financial backdrop that we find ourselves in as a nation. So if you were ever feeling overwhelmed in terms of your own financial position, if there are some niggles in terms for you, in terms of, am I doing what needs to be done? You are not alone. So particularly in this environment that we find ourselves in now, 97% of Kiwis are concerned about the cost of living. And yes, thanks Adele, we will record this at the end. So we are recording it now and you'll receive a recording of this at the end. So 97% of Kiwis are concerned about the cost of living. I don't know about you, but every time I go to the supermarket, I feel like I'm bleeding money. Sometimes I gasp a little bit just in terms of how much things have increased of late. We've had exponential interest rate rises over the last 12 months. So we're all very conscious around the stress around money and finances. 38% of 55 to 65-year-olds are mortgage-free. In terms of averages, the average Kiwi buys their first home at 36, and it takes them 30 years to pay off that mortgage. So again, not quite doing enough to help sort that retirement piece, and 95% don't have a plan to ensure they have enough for retirement. We know that as a nation, we work so hard. Mostly we earn good money, but we're just not making the financial progress we deserve. So that's the backdrop that we're working against right now. And why do we think that is? Why are we not making the financial progress we deserve? And I think some of it plays into the fact of we're kind of comfortably inefficient. And in terms of when we think about setting financial goals and having a really good plan, I think we worry a little bit around that we'll lose our sense of autonomy and balance. You know, like we work really hard. We want to make sure that we enjoy our life. We don't want to be judged. We don't want to be confined. And I think that does play into our hesitancy in terms of thinking about, well, how do we be ambitious? How do we better ourselves when we want to make sure that we balance that out in terms of living a happy life? In reality, it is the exact opposite when you are working to a plan or a goal that aligns to your values. There's this thing called habitual adaptation. So there's lots of psychology around how we operate in terms of our finances and whether we achieve our goals or not. A big word, essentially what it means, we get used to things as humans, good things, bad things. So I don't know if you've ever got into the habit of buying your lunch every day, and because you're busy, you don't have enough time, so you've got to buy your lunch every day. And sometimes when you come to Friday, you're like kind of sick of Subway, had sushi, I don't really feel like anything. Versus if you set yourself a target and you have this ambitious goal, and you know what's going to feed into that goal? Let's see if we can have a little bit more left over every week. So I'm just going to have work lunches out once a week. You savor that. You're like, ooh, do I want sushi? And you really look forward to it and you really enjoy it. So it's interesting. If you can kind of sometimes space out some of the things that you want to do, you enjoy it more. So that's interesting in terms of challenging that thinking. And I think that often we have that FOMO, and I kind of see that as the fear of making a mistake or doing something that's kind of a bit dumb. We worry, we're like, we're not quite sure what strategy we should be implementing. And again, and sometimes that we're not sure, we're a little bit overwhelmed. No, we're not quite sure what to do. So the default position is, well, we just keep doing what we're doing, but there is an opportunity cost associated with that. And quite often as well, when we're trying to set good, clear financial goals for us and our family, sometimes it kind of feels like you're drinking from a fire hydrant. There's just so much information available, and sometimes it's contradictory. And then you set a path, and then you go to a barbecue, and Merv is like, well, why are you doing that? That's ridiculous. I wouldn't do that. And you're like, good God, why am I doing that? So we flip-flop, and we're just not quite sure what we should be doing to get ahead. So I really do think that plays into it across the country. But around this time, which is why we have sequenced this webinar in January, so we're kicking off the new year, often we are thinking about goals. It's that beautiful clean slate, fresh new year, new you, etc. And we looked at a survey in November 2022, and 76% of us were setting goals for 2023. So what do those goals look like for New Zealanders? And these are all great goals. 36% of us wanted to increase our earnings. Again, great goal. But I actually think often we think that is the only thing that is going to fix our finances in terms of achieving those goals. We think, okay, well, we'll get that pay rise and then we're going to start getting ahead. But in reality, the more that you earn, the more that you spend, and the more you disconnect from your finances often. So often, great to get a pay rise, but please, please put it to good use in terms of making sure that you're more resilient and that you are doing what needs to be done in terms of that future trajectory. Love this goal around paying off debt. So 23% of people want to pay off debt. That could be short-term debt, it could be a mortgage. I think really important, again, as I said, to have that goal in terms of building your financial resilience. They want to find a better deal on financial services. We want to pay less fees, etc., on our KiwiSavers. Interesting, 18% want to start a budget, and I'm going to talk you through the importance around that. Sometimes people are a bit allergic to the word budget, but that budget and that cash flow planning, that is the engine room of any financial plan going forward. And I love the goal of saving for a home deposit. So 10% of people want to save for a home deposit. So we're often thinking about setting goals, etc., around this time, because there's that sense of a fresh start, clean year to achieve those goals. Sad day though. January 19th, which is tomorrow, that's the day most people give up on their New Year's resolutions. So we're sometimes good at setting goals, not so good at achieving goals. So why is that? And this is true of goals in other aspects of your life, but obviously today we're going to talk about finances. So how do you set a goal that you can follow? So again, a good goal for you, it's motivating. Obviously, it is true to what you're capable of. But the goal itself, really important to have a good, clear goal, because it's setting your direction. And if you can imagine, and this is the analogy that James Clear uses, it's like you're in a boat and the rudder is your goal. It's helping set the direction. And again, the goal has to be relevant to you and your financial capability, and a goal that you can commit to. And some of the goals we hear at Enable Me: I want to prepare for retirement. I want to sleep at night without worrying about retirement. I want to make progress to reflect my income. I want to pay off my mortgage faster. I want to help my kids get ahead. That's a lovely goal. That's certainly a goal of myself. I've got 3 kiddies, 10, 12, and 15, and I don't want to argue with my partner around money. So these are often the goals or the things that our clients reach out in terms of making sure that they're achieving or they're on the right path going forward. And goals can change in terms of your own life stage. So we've just popped a few goals up there just in terms of often those kind of bigger, chunkier goals. They're not necessarily true for everyone, and they don't actually happen in sequence either. Really interesting. Often we see people who have gone through relationship breakups, etc., and they have the same goals, but from a timeline perspective, they're sometimes way back at the beginning. They've got to get to where we all need to in terms of living a good life now, but also into retirement, but they've got half the time to do so. So they have the same goals. They've just got to be really clinical in terms of how they execute around those goals. Really good tip to make sure, yes, have a great goal, make sure it's really clear, but make sure you write it down. Research shows that you're 1.4 times more likely to reach that goal. Again, it's just at hand, you can recall it. It's great for kind of clarifying that thought pattern in terms of that goals. And make sure that, again, the goal is true for you. So if you have a paper off to the side, I'd really encourage you to start writing down your own goals. So what are you trying to achieve? What is your financial vision or goal for the future? Why is it important to you? What does it mean to you? And often it's really important, if you have a goal, that you have to chunk it down in terms of smaller milestones. Because again, if the goal's too big, often it feels too hard, and it's quite hard. If it does feel quite hard, we get a bit disheartened. For example, if you are wanting to buy a house, for example, what kind of house are you looking to buy? How much does that cost? What is the deposit that you require for that house? What do you have in KiwiSaver, savings, etc.? What are you capable of saving, being purposeful, having a good structure? And then you can sequence that out in terms of making sure you are making progress, because you've got to measure yourself, right? Because great to have a goal, but you've got to measure that whether you're tracking to that goal or not. And when do you want that goal achieved by? So you might want to get yourself into a property in the next 2 years. And again, you chunk that down in terms of those milestones. And what are you willing to sacrifice? We all have good goals, but again, can't do everything. I think if we're really clinical around how we execute those goals, we do have maximum choice. But there's an element of, you have to do the mahi. I remember I saw a lovely guy a year or so ago. I think he was 2 years out of uni, and he came to see me, and he'd been 2 years working, went to university, and he's like, do you know what? My goal, I'm exhausted. I would like to stop working, and I just would like passive income. And I'm kind of keen to stop working now. Don't we all want passive income? But again, we have to execute around a strategy, we want to make sure that we have the tools available to us to be able to facilitate that. So it's a great goal to want to have, and to be honest, most of my clients want financial freedom, so they want more choice around the work they do, how long that they work for, but we need to be pulling levers in terms of a financial strategy to make sure that you can facilitate that. So we talk about leverage, paying off debt. What are the good strategies around that to make sure that you can land where you need to? But again, nothing comes without a bit of sacrifice. So again, there's an element of you have to do the work. And so again, really good to have a clear goal. Goal is great to set the direction, but what ensures you get to where you need to be? It's the system, the structure, and the strategy that you put in place to get you there, essentially. And that is the critical piece around goal setting. So, for example, you might have a goal of, I'd like to buy an investment property to help sort my retirement. That is an awesome goal. That is true for lots of my clients. But what are the structures and the strategies that you need to put in place to make sure that you buy the right property for you that's going to facilitate that goal? And for us, that's about understanding, well, again, what is your retirement number? What do you need to be spending to live a happy life? Because that drives your strategy. That tells us what property you should buy in terms of the capital gain you require, the cash flow associated with that property, etc. It comes down to the mortgage strategy you have right now to make sure that you're not paying too much interest. And it makes sure, again, that we're doing what needs to be done and sequencing this out so that we're actually doing the right thing to help achieve that strategy. So great to have a good goal, but we need to make sure that we have a great process or a structure around that. Back to my boat analogy. So we're in the boat, we've got the great goal, that's our rudder, but our structure and our processes are the oars. So again, I think the great beauty around having a great goal is it almost helps us to select the processes and the strategies that are going to help us get us to where we need to be. And again, in terms of those goals, important that they're really true to you, that they're really motivating, and we don't flip-flop too much. You know, it's like, yes, I want to buy a property. Actually, I want to go overseas. No, I'm back to buying a property. And again, we start to row in circles, right? And we don't achieve where we need to go. So again, great to have a good goal, but we want to make sure that we have the appropriate structures and strategies in place to make sure that we're doing what needs to be done on an everyday basis to get us there, right? And again, we anchor this to action. Great to have a good rudder, great to have oars, but you're never going to get anywhere by just holding the rudder. You have to row. We need to be doing what needs to be done. And again, that's the systems and the structures that you put in place every day that help make sure that you track where you need to in terms of those financial goals. And again, some of these are not particularly sexy, but they are important in terms of making sure that you land where you need to. So how do you achieve goals consistently? The easier something is to do, the more likely you are to stick to it. Friction, right? And you will never rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. So part of this is making sure that we have really good systems and structures in place to ensure that you land where you need to in terms of those goals. So for us, with our clients, again, we're trying to make sure that the systems and the structures we put in place and wrap around you in terms of those financial goals mean that the default position is success, not failure. It's like for me, if I'm the goal, always my goal, to stay hydrated and not drink so much Coke. So for me, I have a water bottle at my desk. Easier for me to drink water if I have a bottle beside me. I don't buy Coke at the supermarket because I know that, I usually actually have quite good willpower at 9, less so at 4 p.m. when I'm tired, I'm working from home, the kids are grizzling, I'm feeling stressed. If I go to the fridge and there's some cans of Coke there, I will drink the Coke, particularly if I've forgotten my drink bottle, etc. Again, it's about making sure that you set up an environment where the default result that you want, i.e. drinking water, is easier for you. It's right there. And it's exactly what we do for our finances. And just giving you some examples in terms of, you have a goal of making sure that you pay off your mortgage as fast as possible and you land where you need to in retirement. And great to have that goal, but to go alongside that, you've got to make sure that you have a really good mortgage structure, right? Again, to make sure that you pay no more interest than you need to back to the bank. So one of the tools or the strategies that we help our clients with is to make sure that they have a really clear debt or savings repayment goal that's actually embedded within their mortgage structure. So again, they know what they're aiming for, because if you don't know what you're aiming for, you will hit it every time in terms of not doing what needs to be done. So again, amazing to be able to embed those savings or debt reduction goals within your mortgage. And what we ascertain for our clients is we understand, well, being purposeful, cash in, cash out, is there anything left over? If there is, let's tip that against the mortgage in a way that you can reduce that debt immediately, but re-access that progress if need be. And a revolving credit is a really useful mechanism with controls around it, right? Because again, we're trying to create a good environment where you make better decisions. And we advocate this straight from when children are operating in money, in terms of separating out spending, saving and giving. But again, it's about having visibility on where you want to be, so you don't have to rely around willpower. So for our clients, they have a really strong, clear bank account structure whereby they have upper parameters around what they want to do. They have full visibility, and it's easier to make a good decision. Like, for example, for me, within that bank account structure, I have a day-to-day spending account for things like groceries, takeaways, eating out, etc. My money comes out on Monday. If I've got no money left in the account on Friday, a quieter weekend, and that's the only account I have FPOS access to. And my kids actually crawl all over the account, so they know that they have more leeway for sushi if there's money left over. You know, every weekend they're like, so mama, how much money do we have left in our day-to-day spending account? And I love that. They know that there's limited resources in the world and at home, and we make decisions around that. And I know for a lot of my clients, part of their goal is, well, I want to have the ability to help my children financially. And as part of this better environment and structure and process to make sure that you're achieving your goals, we want to make sure that we're helping your children. So we're creating financially independent children. And the greatest thing I think in terms of that, how you execute around that goal, is that you make sure that you sort yourself out and you're achieving at your end, and then they know the rules of the game and they do what you do, because that's the exact same structure that they should be replicating when they leave home. And again, it's helping you make better decisions when it's hard, you're exhausted, you're tired, you kind of forget the goal, you're like, who cares? Who cares? I'm exhausted. But again, you're trying to implement things that are going to help you remember that goal and just make it a little bit trickier to spend money. I think that automation piece really does play into that. And we can see that with KiwiSaver already, right? If we have savings goals that we're striving towards, automate them as much as possible. Take the decision making out of it. Exactly what KiwiSaver does, right? If we're honest with ourselves, would we really have those KiwiSaver balances in investments if it wasn't going in automatically? Highly unlikely. But that's what we'd like you to be doing in everything you do around bank account structure, mortgage structure. Let's automate it. again, you want to make sure that you can make better decisions that actually get you to where you need to be in terms of those financial goals by having those systems and those structures in place. Again, great tip in terms of making sure that you achieve financially. Don't use credit cards, Afterpay, etc. They just facilitate overspend. It's a behavioural economics principle that people spend about 20% more than they would otherwise by using credit cards, just because it's a less transparent form of payment. You know, you swipe your card, have I paid? Who knows, who cares? And I can hear you saying, well, that is part of my strategy, Katie. You don't understand. I pay it off in full. I get points. I'm winning. But are you? Again, it's just, we would like you to be purposeful around how you execute to make sure that you do land where you need to be in terms of those goals. For lots of our clients, we are executing with such precision. Sometimes it feels like we're landing a helicopter on a pin and everything counts. And if you're spending about 20% more than you would otherwise, I would much rather that we captured that and put that towards a happier life or getting you ahead versus just slipping through the cracks. And Afterpay, again, if you don't have the money at hand, shouldn't buy it, right? Because we shouldn't really be buying things that we haven't saved for. Right, and we definitely don't want to be teaching or our kids to be watching us doing that. That is anti our goals. And again, when we're setting those goals, we want to make sure that we set the right goals in terms of that longer term trajectory. So for example, you could set a goal, and this is where systems and structures are just so beautiful and part of our passion at Enable Me. Your goal, and often I hear this when people sat down before me initially, it's like, well, I just want to get in control and I want to clear my short-term debt. And it's around that control and that financial resilience. That is really the goal. Great to clear short-term debt, particularly at the interest rates that we pay in New Zealand. But often you can actually achieve that goal very quickly. For example, you've got lots of credit card debt, bits and bobs, you've put a holiday on there, you've been a bit short some months, and it's just accidentally kind of crept up and up and up, and it sits at about 20K, for example. You could immediately go to the bank if you can hit all of their serviceability rules, etc., and you can get a top up. And you can achieve that goal. You can just clear it. But if you do that and you don't change anything else in terms of the decisions and what you did every day to facilitate you getting that credit card debt in the first place, you're 80% more likely to get into that position again. Because again, you can't will yourself to be better with money. You need to have better systems and structures around that. So again, it's that structural level. Let's not have the credit card. Let's make sure that we're being more intentional. Let's have that sexier goal that's more motivating for you to try harder. Yes, be financial resilient. Yes, clear short-term debt. But that shouldn't be our only goal. We've got to be making sure that we look further ahead. And that's part of my role as a coach, is to have a longer line of sight than my clients. Because again, we're busy, we're juggling lots of priorities. I want you to live a beautiful life. I absolutely want you to, but please, can you make sure that you're getting your asset position to work as hard as possible for you? Please don't pay any more interest than you need to the bank. Have a goal to pay off that mortgage, but facilitate it. Don't have this lofty, mythical, I'm going to pay off my mortgage as fast as possible. But then you look at your mortgage and it's like 700,000, you know, you kind of die inside. You're like, oh, well, too hard, don't want to think about it. I'll think about it tomorrow. Again, you want to make sure that you have the right systems and the structures in place to help facilitate that. And lots of different things embed into that. And again, I've just popped in there, again, around creating a better environment. Unsubscribe from marketing emails. If you're a shopper like myself, it can be very tempting. So again, we're trying to remove temptations so that we can hold the course when we're tired and exhausted and it's feeling a little bit relentless. essentially. And it's just so critical to make sure that we work hard and we make the financial progress that we deserve. And again, we all have different tendencies around money. So again, we have different structures and strategies that we need to put in place to make sure that we can achieve what we want to in terms of maximizing our position. For example, I'm more of a shopper, so I derive emotional satisfaction from shopping. Ironic, I know. And so for me, I need goals that are sexy enough for me to try harder. I love the idea of paying off debt. It's just deeply unsexy to me. I want to anchor it to something else, i.e. retiring early or helping my children. That is motivating to me. So again, know yourself in terms of the constructs that you put around yourself and the strategies that you implement to make sure that you land where you need to be. I've got lots of clients who are supersonic savers. So their default position is to save, which luckily for me is my husband. So again, they derive emotional satisfaction from saving. So again, for them, it's not so much about removing temptation, because they're actually good, kind of at austerity a little bit sometimes, often savers, amazing, beautiful, beautiful strength. But quite often, a lot of my savers, they're great at that cash flow piece, but they struggle a little bit in terms of risk and investment strategy, in terms of really growing their wealth to make sure that they can facilitate this great retirement, help their children, because they are a little bit risk averse. They get a little bit overwhelmed around all the things they could do. They don't want to get anything wrong. So the default position is they keep doing what they're doing, but there's an opportunity cost associated with that. So again, often that's around making sure that when you're working with the confines of your plan, you make sure that you have structures in place whereby you can safely assess investment options, and you make sure that you understand that sometimes, quite often, the safest option is not to do nothing. That often has the greatest cost to it. And yeah, I think sometimes that's the default position of New Zealanders. We just get stuck. Yeah, it's just too hard. And again, we don't want to get anything wrong, but it means that we do not land where we need to. Those stats that I went through in the beginning, they're super average. We can do better than that. And again, that's about executing on a better strategy. Otherwise, we end up paying too much interest to the bank. And we have super profitable banks in New Zealand. And banks are great. They help facilitate amazing strategies. They help us get us into our family home. They help us in terms of potential investment strategies around investment properties, etc. But our interest rates are really high, and we have high fees comparatively. So again, we want to make sure that we have good structures and strategies around that. And again, we want to make sure that we are growing our wealth to where we need to be. We're using the options and the resources around us to make sure that we land where we need to in terms of those goals around financial freedom and security. And a plotter, they do really well in terms of that automation piece, because they're kind of somewhere in between, kind of not very good at saving, not super great at shopping, either don't really care. So again, if you automate it, that works really well, and a little bit of accountability helps everyone. And we'll go through that in a minute in terms of achieving what you need to. And obviously measurement is absolutely critical. And again, it's about celebrating success. It's one of the biggest happiness drivers. If you can make sure that you remember the beginning and that you are making progress, because you know how it is, like you look back maybe 5-10 years and you are earning more than you ever have, but every kind of pay rise gets absorbed. We don't celebrate it. We don't make the most of it. We've got to have measurements in place to make sure that we are doing what we need to be. And we've got to course correct if we don't. We've got to mix things up, right? If our strategy is not working and we're not achieving our goal, we need to course correct. And again, obviously, really easy to set a budget, kind of to stick to said budget. So for our clients, we say, well, here's our intention. Let's measure it with a better structure and a strategy going forward. So it's that perfect marriage. And some people, again, are allergic to that budget word. I prefer spending plan personally, in terms of my own tendency. But again, you've got to keep your eye on the prize. And again, I work with lots of supersonic savers, but just purely saving, it's just not going to get you to where you need to be, particularly when inflation is tracking at 7%. Goodness knows what it will be this month. The value of your money will be going down in terms of interest if your only strategy is to save. And again, to me, the bigger purpose for my clients around budgeting is, yes, I want them to be purposeful. Yes, I want to maximize what's left over. But also, we're trying to strategize around that, right? Because I'm trying to figure out, and this is what I want you to be doing. I want you to understand, well, what do you need to be spending to live a happy life? Knowing that number, how do you grow that asset position to a point that feeds that when you're no longer working? Everyone has a different number. Let's understand yours and make sure that you execute around a strategy that's going to get you to where you need to be. So it's part of that broader picture and that plan and that goal going forward. But that cash surplus, or the cash that's left over, that's the engine room. It dictates where we land in retirement. It dictates what property you should be buying. It dictates how you structure the debt and other growth strategies that you should be implementing. It's that driving room and understanding how to contextualize that in terms of your goals. So it's that bigger picture that we always want you to be focusing on going forward, because budgeting, what does that even mean in isolation? And I think accountability really does play into it for lots of people in terms of making sure that they achieve what they should be. Lots of us know what we should be doing. Knowing and doing are two different things. And certainly for my clients, I think you always do better when you work with somebody else. It's like a personal trainer at the gym. You lift your game, you do what needs to be done, and you get there in the shortest amount of time. And it's actually important who you surround yourself in terms of what you even think or know you are capable of. I had some lovely clients come in who are in their late, I think they were, how old were they? I think about 58 and 57. And they were tracking to be mortgage free, I think in about 14 years. So not by retirement. And I said to them, well, I think that if we can find that money that's going walkabout right now and put that to better use, we can get you mortgage free in about 5 years. And she was like, but all my friends have mortgages. What's the point in that? I'll just sell my home. And it's like, well, all your friends have mortgages. The default position's a bit, well, you can do better than that. And it's about unpacking that in terms of, for her, she really wanted to make sure she can help her children. She'd love to travel. It's, well, let's contextualize that lever that we're pulling in terms of paying off that mortgage into that more exciting lifestyle, right? Because if you can pay off a mortgage earlier, that's a lot more free flow cash that you can save, do more fun things with, and make sure that you really maximize your position. Not that I'm suggesting that you change friend groups or anything, but it is having a real sense of progress and understanding what you're capable of. And sometimes that's a little bit tricky to assess yourself. And we often go into lots of amazing New Zealand organisations in terms of their financial wellbeing programs. And it's really cool. Well, cool's the wrong word, Michael, we're a nerd, in terms of, they start talking differently. They're at the lunchroom and they're like, what's your clothing budget? What? Let me have that. And again, there starts to be a little bit of rivalry, and we start talking about all of this because, again, I think it feels like a bit of a taboo subject in terms of finances, financial goals, what we earn, what we want. We just don't talk about it. And remember, money's not good or bad. When you feel like you're in control of it, you feel like you're in control of your life. So take note of the people you surround yourself with, and if you do need help and you want to maximize, reach out to the experts, because they are there to help in terms of jump you to a different trajectory and unlocking your potential, right? Because I think for most of my clients, when I ask them, well, what will happen if you keep doing what you're doing in terms of your financial goals? And actually, for most people, they say, I will be absolutely fine, but I will miss out on opportunities. And isn't that gut-wrenching? We need to be doing better. We work hard. Let's make that asset position work as hard as possible in terms of the structures and the strategies we implement every day. And again, making sure that our goals are right for us in terms of, you know, my guy who was lovely, never judging, who'd been working for 2 years, but his goal for the next 12 months was to stop working and earn passive income. So it can't be too audacious, it has to be possible. But again, it can't be super average either, right? It has to be, we want to know that we're pushing ourselves a little bit to make sure that we are and we can do better. And again, that feeds into our kids and our wider whānau doing better always. So again, we want to make sure that you have ambitious goals within the construct of what's achievable. That is motivating. But again, great to have a good goal. We want to make sure we pair that with a really good structure and a strategy that's going to make sure that you make the financial progress you deserve. And again, back to that balance point in terms of why people don't achieve what they need to, you can unequivocally, you can never have a structure and a strategy that's based around deprivation for a long time. Sometimes we need to suck it up because things get hard. You know, someone loses job, etc., and we have to tighten our belts. But again, we need to strategize around how we can get ourselves back to where we need to be, because no one sticks to a plan that is just based around deprivation. I know that, you know that. We want to find that sweet point in terms of earmarking space for the things that make you happy. And everyone's got different things that make them happy. I love travel, making sure that my kids can do the activities that they want. My husband, he loves his coffee and gaming, etc. Great. That obviously doesn't make me happy. But again, for us as a couple, we need to make sure that we do live a good life, but everything else, please make sure that you're scooping up to make sure you make the financial progress that you deserve. And you can't, to be honest, you can't be too rigid. You cannot have a plan that's set in concrete. Otherwise, it quite quickly becomes irrelevant to you. You want to make sure that you build in that flex, that you have a good buffer going forward in terms of making sure that you land where you need to. And sometimes, again, I don't care where you're starting from, it's making sure that you build up those fundamentals and having a good, robust buffer in terms of achieving that goal is often really, really important to make sure that we land where we need to. And again, there's layers around what we need to do, and you can't achieve that top pinnacle until we layer things up going forward. And sometimes we can layer really fast, but there is an element of layering. And kind of how I anchor this for all of my clients, kind of 4 pillars in terms of making sure that you achieve those financial goals. First pillar is you always maximize that cash surplus, as I've talked about. That's the engine room of any financial progress going forward. And again, there's lots of structures and strategies that you need to be facilitating, of which some I've talked about tonight, to make sure that you understand what you're capable of in terms of that cash flow piece. Secondly, we want to make sure that you reduce debt. It's just dead money to us. And thirdly, we need to be growing your wealth. And I'm pretty sure for you, like for me, we need a concurrent strategy where we clear debt and grow wealth at the same time to land where we need to. And that 4th pillar is always, as part of this journey in terms of achieving financial goals, let's make sure that we are creating financially independent children, right? So they know the rules of the game. They know the structures and the strategies they need to be implementing to land where they need to. And then we're not having to support useless children for longer than we need to. So again, we're all about living a beautiful, intentional life. And to do so, you got to celebrate the wins, right? Sometimes it feels a bit nuggety, but you've got to remember that starting point. And any progress is progress in my book. And sometimes it ebbs and flows, right? You get curveballs. And hasn't COVID showed us that in terms of income, expenses, sickness, etc.? That's okay. It's just we want to make sure that we can kind of course correct and make sure that rudder is still pointing in the right direction. We've got great oars and we're rowing that boat to make sure that we land where we need to. So we're always about celebrating the wins along the way, because again, if you fall in love with that process and that structure and that strategy that you're implementing along the way, we live our best life, right? And I think that's just so important. So key takeaways for tonight. And I know I've talked about lots of different things, but the recipe for financial progress, we want to make sure that you have the right goals, that they're clear, they're true for you, they're really motivating. That is a really important aspect of making sure that you land where you need to. And as part of setting those right goals, it's so important to sequence them a little bit. Again, I know I've touched on that tonight. Recently, I had a lovely client come in, I think it was last Thursday, Friday, and they had great goals, very ambitious goals for the next 12 months. And I'm like, oh, let's lean into this. So she was having her second baby due in, I want to say May. They wanted to do a renovation on their home. They wanted to buy an investment. This is all in the next 12 months. I'm like, oh, game on. They want to buy an investment property, and they want to, he's been in the same job for 12 years and he wants to start a business that he's always wanted to do. Those are all awesome goals. And obviously the baby's coming regardless, not really a goal. Fate. Great. Has a financial impact too, but is happening. But all of those other goals, whilst important, you have to sequence them out. And some of them are mutually exclusive if you try and do them in the wrong order. i.e., if you start your business before you've bought the investment property, you're going to have to put pause on that for a couple of years because you've got to build up the financials associated with that business to make sure that the bank will take them into account in terms of you being able to access lending from the bank and proving serviceability. So again, it's a ordering and timing, making sure that you pick the right goals for you and you're tracking where you need to in terms of that structure and that strategy. And sequencing is important. You want to make sure that you have the right environment so it's easier to make good decisions. You know your numbers and you are taking action. Knowing and doing are two different things. And at Enable Me, we're always anchoring ourselves in execution, because you can do something, but there's a difference between doing something and doing it really clinically, again, to remove doubt around getting you to where you need to be. So again, it's around really getting deep diving into those numbers, which I love, of course. And so a goal helps you focus your attention and priorities. You know, that example I've just given to you, great goals. We just need to prioritize when those happen to make sure that you don't accidentally scupper yourself just in terms of that broader picture. And people don't reach their goals because they're not relevant or achievable. Often the biggest obstacle is you. How annoying. And again, there's no judgment around this. This is what we're all doing. And I think often the biggest obstacle is we don't quite know, we don't have a plan, we don't know what we're capable of. And in the absence of not knowing, we just do what we've always done, hoping for the best. And there is a better way. Just got to understand the rules of the game and execute around them, right? So to be successful, you've got to set a relevant goal, put the right systems in place to make sure that you land where you need to. Please celebrate the wins. We're always saying to our clients, please live your best life, but get that asset position working as hard as possible for you to make sure that you're on the right trajectory and you make the financial progress you deserve. And know thyself, we want to make sure that we can always accelerate progress. So I think building accountability never hurts, and even an independent assessment in terms of where you should land going forward is always really helpful. And over the Christmas break, and Ruby Tui, the New Zealand rugby player, I think she's amazing. I read her book over the holidays, which I strongly encourage anyone to do. And she's got some beautiful quotes, which I've nabbed for this presentation. And isn't it true? There is no such thing as an inevitable, good or bad. There's just not. You can change your trajectory anytime you like. And I love this last quote. We're always one decision away from changing everything. And, if you have a big, audacious goal that feels far away, you just need to take step 1 and then step 10. It's just on the horizon. So again, really encourage you to make sure that you are setting good goals. 2023, we're going to own. We don't care about the headwinds. The Reserve Bank can do what they like in terms of interest rates, because we're doing what we can control in terms of our own personal circumstances. And inflation, interest rates, possible recession, that is scary, but we can't control any of those things. All we can control is what we do every day. So that's what I'd like to leave you with. And again, just there's a wee offer at the end of this webinar. If you would like to come along to an independent session with a coach like myself, it's a 90-minute session. You kind of hop on the scales in terms of your own personal finances. If you've got a partner and your finances are combined, they come along, you jump on the financial scales, and we talk about, well, where are you? Let's make sure we have a really good assessment of where you're at now. Where do you want to be in terms of those financial goals? And are you on track to get to where you need to be? And if you're not, let's talk about the systems and the structures that you could be putting in place to make, again, sure you land where you need to. So again, an offer in terms of going to the website, this very long enable.me goals webinar, and there's a special offer, that 90-minute consultation with a coach like myself. Up and down the country, we do videos, etc. The cost is only $250, and that's usually $400. So I have spoken for quite some time. Do we have time for questions?
Hey, Katie. Yeah, we have a little bit of time for questions, and thank you to everyone who submitted some. We've had some good ones come through live that I'll cover off first, I think. Not all related to goal setting, but still relevant to, I'm guessing, their personal goals. But we did have one clarifying question before we get into the rest of them. Vicky's asking, you have mentioned getting ahead with your asset position a couple of times. Can you please explain this a little bit more?
Yeah, and I suppose what I see is that asset position is the resources you have available to you. So that asset position for somebody who's starting out, it's that cash flow piece, right? It's the cash that's left over, it's those savings. It's making sure that you're in the right KiwiSaver plan for you, you're making the right contributions, etc. And then we're building upon that. It's making sure that you're in your right home, because that's feeding into that asset position. We're making sure that that debt is structured correctly. You're not paying any more interest than you should to the bank, and that you are accurately investing or taking opportunities that you should be to making sure that you're growing that wealth piece. Like, for example, lots of people come to me and they've got a mortgage on their home, but they've had their home for quite some time. They've got lots of equity just sitting there doing nothing. Is there an opportunity for them to be tapping into that to buy another property, so they have another appreciating asset through that next asset cycle? Which, wherever you're at, I'm trying to assess, are you executing on the right strategy to make sure that that asset position, essentially what you have, assets versus liabilities, is doing a job? Because if it's not working as hard as it should, you just trade your time for money for longer than you should. When we want to make sure that we're creating opportunities to grow your wealth, no matter where you're at, to make sure that you maximize and you land where you need to. Good question.
Yeah, I thought so too. We have had a couple of people ask questions along the line of, how can I make extra dollars without getting a second job? And do you have any examples of passive income? I wondered if you had any opinions on that based on your client that was looking for passive income to not work for a year.
Yeah, totally bold. I think sometimes for some people it's about side hustles, second jobs. But do you know what? Even every time without fail, and this I would say would be, and I've worked in Enable Me for many, many, many years. I've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of clients. First step is making sure that you are being as intentional as possible with that current position. It's around, there's generally speaking, there's about 15% of net income that goes walkabout in somebody's personal circumstances in terms of inefficiencies. Some of it around overspending, a lot of it paying too much interest in terms of what they could be doing. So great to increase income, and there are opportunities around that. So taking a boarder, lots of opportunities, but sometimes first step is, let's not make this too hard, because that stops us taking any action. Why don't we assess what's going on now in terms of what we could be capable of? Because for the vast majority of people, 15% of what we bring in just goes walkabout right now.
And practicing those efficiencies at your current income shores you up for when you do have an income increase, because sometimes you find that you get that lifestyle creep when your income does go up.
No, exactly. And remember I said people think that actually that's the thing that fixes this. I'm just going to earn more money. But in reality, it's the basis of capitalism. The more that you earn, the more that you spend, and the more you disconnect from your finances, quite frankly.
Exactly. So we have a question here from an attendee saying, am I better to put any cash surplus into KiwiSaver, i.e. up my percentage, or bank savings?
So the vast, and again, this does not constitute individual advice. This is very general. For the vast majority of certainly my clients, with a really good plan and a structure, for the vast majority of my clients, they will match what their employer's doing in terms of contributions. Everything over and above that, they channel into either reducing debt or growing their wealth versus trapping it into KiwiSaver that we can't touch until we can access it to buy, if we can access it to buy our first home or 65. Great to get good returns, but flexibility is really important for all of my clients. So again, it depends on the plan, does not constitute individual advice.
Yeah, it's that liquidity piece.
Yeah.
We have a question here, how to plan for mortgage interest rate rises, obviously very topical at the moment.
For sure. And first things first, be intentional around your spending, right? Because if you're not, there's 15% that's going walkabout right now. If you find that and put that to better use whilst you do have the lower interest rates and pay down that debt a little bit faster in a way that you can reaccess progress, it means that your debt is lower when those interest rates come off. And again, sometimes it all depends, right? And again, this is not individual advice. It depends on your circumstances as well. So for some people, for example, they've paid off their home and they're just looking at, well, how do I sustain investment debt against my property, etc. Sometimes it makes more sense to kick that mortgage term out, for example, by refinancing, just to alleviate cash flow pressure to make sure that they can keep that property. But again, it's that intentionality, understanding, well, what is your goal? What are you capable of? And what are the levers I could be pulling to make sure that I land where I need to? But again, if we're being more intentional, we find that money that's going walkabout, we have that buffer. We've tried to pay off that debt faster. Again, when those interest rates come, the fixed rates come off and we've got to pay that bigger rate, we have more capacity to do so.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Katie. We've run out of time. Didn't get to all the questions, but I think we got to some relevant ones. So just to reiterate, that offer up on screen, it will be sent out to you via email along with a recording of tonight's session. But you're entitled to get that 90-minute consultation for just $250. And yeah, thank you all for joining us this evening. And thank you, Katie. Another great session.
Great. Good luck. Achieve those goals. Do what needs to be done. Thanks for joining us. Take care.